We just finished Go Straight to the Source, which was about using different types of information to conduct research. Today we're going to start a really cool research project about natural disasters. We just finished reading about one type of natural disaster, earthquakes, and today we will discuss other types of natural disasters. You will choose the one that interests you the most and conduct research to learn more information. To help you learn a little bit about the different types of natural disasters, we're going to watch a video. You will use a graphic organizer to jot notes about each natural disaster to help you decide which one you want to research and learn more about. Take a moment and in your notebook, I would like you to write down this graphic organizer. Pause the video now, please. Today, you're going to choose one natural disaster to begin researching. Before we start researching, you will need to pick which natural disaster interests you the most and what you want to learn. I'm going to choose earthquakes. You may choose any of the other disasters. Please take a moment and pause the video and make the decision on which natural disaster you would like to research. Now that you have chosen your natural disaster, you are going to start researching. We're going to use the same graphic organizer we always do, but we're going to use it to help make a plan and organize our notes. At the top of our paper, we will write the type of natural disaster, so I wrote earthquakes. Then we will use the first box for the introduction and use the remaining boxes to organize our notes, and the very last box on the back of the paper to write down where we found the information. Let me show you what I mean. We will be taking notes from at least 3 different sources. For my first source, I will use the book Earthquakes by Seymour Simon. When we take notes, we have to be very careful to not copy the information directly, but rather paraphrase what the author stated. One way to do that is to read the text and then look away and think about the important information and put it in your own words. Let's read the first page together and then decide what information we might want to include. Let's read this together. The earth beneath our feet usually feels solid and firm, yet 1,000,000 times each year, on average of once every 30 seconds, somewhere around the world, the ground shakes and sways. We call this an earthquake. According to our informative checklist, first we need to think about the introduction. The introduction needs to include the topic and needs to define the topic so that our readers understand what we are writing about. In the second sentence, the author tells us that when the earth shakes and sways, it's called an earthquake. We also find out how earthquakes occur around the world. Both of those details are important, but I have to write that in my own words. So I look away from the text and jot down some words or phrases to help me remember what I want to write later. In the first box, I will write, Earth moves and shakes 1,000,000 times around the world. Most earthquakes are too small to be noticed by people. Only sensitive scientific instruments record their passage. But hundreds of earthquakes every year are strong enough to change the face of the land. A large earthquake in Kobe, Japan in 1995 toppled a freeway onto its side and cracked the roadway in numerous places. This picture is an example of the enormous destruction an earthquake can cause in a heavily populated area. The second paragraph tells us that some earthquakes are so small that no one notices them, and others are so big that they can cause a huge amount of destruction. I just paraphrased that entire paragraph. Now I need to write down enough information to help me remember that. I will write this detail in the same box since it would also be good for my introduction. Unnoticeable to huge destruction. On the morning of September 19, 1985, a major earthquake struck Mexico City. It killed 10,000 people and injured another 20,000. Hundreds of buildings were destroyed, including homes and stores, hotels and hospitals, and schools and businesses. The multi-level parking garage collapsed like a house of cards, while some of the neighboring buildings suffered only slight damage. This page talks about one of the many historical earthquakes. I'm not sure how many I will read about in my 3 sources, but I certainly don't want to write about all of them. For now, I will jot a note in the second box about this devastating earthquake and then decide later which ones I will include in my paper. For the subtopic, I will write historical earthquakes, and then I will write 1985, Mexico City killed 10,000. Let's read one more page together. Most earthquakes take place in Earth's crust, a 5 to 30 mile deep layer of rocks that covers our planet. Cracks in the rocks, called faults, run through the crust. In one type of fault, called a strike-slip fault, the rocks on one side of the fault try to move past the rocks on the other side, causing energy to build up. For years, friction will hold the rocks in place, but finally, like a stretched rubber band, the rocks suddenly snap past each other. The place where this happens is called the focus of the earthquake. From the focus, the energy of the earthquake speeds outward through the surrounding rocks in all directions. The shocks may last for less than a second for a small earthquake to several minutes for a major one. Weaker shocks called aftershocks can follow an earthquake on and off for days or weeks. This section is about how earthquakes form, so this information doesn't go with the introduction or the list of historical earthquakes. I'll need to start a new section for these notes. In the third box for this subtopic, I'll write when earthquakes happen. Then for the details, I'll write page 8, Earth's crust, 5 to 30 miles deep, cracks called faults, rocks snap. I'm going to stop taking notes from this book now so that you may have a chance to get started with your research. But first, I need to take note of the source I've used so far. I'm not sure how many subtopics I will have, so I'm going to use the very last box on the back of my paper to keep a list of the resources that I use. I will write Earthquakes by Seymour Simon. Here are my notes so far on my topic of earthquakes. Earth moves and shakes 1,000,000 times around the world, unnoticeable to huge destruction. Historical earthquakes, 1985, Mexico City, killed 10,000. And then our source on the back, Earthquakes by Seymour Simon.